Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to deconstruct one of the last great firsts here on planet Earth, the incredible quest to walk across Antarctica totally and completely alone. It's a story that's got it all: insane endurance, some pretty bitter controversy, and, yeah, the ultimate human price. Now, if you asked most people this question, the answer would seem pretty obvious, all thanks to this massive flood of headlines that came out back in 2018. It was one of those stories that just felt perfect for the modern world, a real tale of adventure. An American adventurer, Colin O'Brady, told the world he had done it. He'd achieved a feat that people had apparently been trying to pull off for 100 years, something that a lot of folks thought was just plain impossible. He skied for almost 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles across the coldest, the windiest, and the highest continent on the entire planet. To give you some perspective, that's like skiing from New York City almost all the way to Minneapolis. Just think about that. And he did it in 54 absolutely grueling days, all by himself. The whole time, he's pulling this 375-pound sled, they call it a pulk, that had every single thing he needed to stay alive. The story just blew up. It was celebrated all over the world as this incredible testament to human endurance. But almost right away, inside the very small, very tight-knit world of polar explorers, some cracks started to appear in the ice. This claim of a world first, well, it started to get really complicated. And it turns out that that title, the first, it is fiercely, fiercely debated. And the whole thing comes down to the rules of adventure, these rules that aren't really written down anywhere, but are understood deep in the bones of the people who risk their lives out there. And here is the smoking gun. Right after O'Brady's big finish, you have these hugely respected figures, like the mountaineer Conrad Anker, who start saying, whoa, hold on a second. They started pointing to another name, a Norwegian explorer who they say had already done it more than 20 years earlier. So, to really get what's going on here, we gotta learn the lingo. Unsupported. This is a sacred term in polar exploration. It means you are a completely self-contained unit. Everything you need, you have with you from the start. No one can drop you food, no one can give you new gear, nothing. And then you've got unassisted. This one means you move using only your own power, your own two legs. No kites to catch the crazy Antarctic wind, no sails, none of that. And listen, this isn't just people splitting hairs. This is the very foundation of how these polar firsts are judged and respected. In this quote, it just perfectly illustrates the other huge point of contention. O'Brady's route, well, it mostly followed this graded and flagged road called the South Pole Traverse. It's a route that tractors actually use to bring supplies to the South Pole Station. For the purist, that takes a lot of the real exploration, the navigating, the danger, the unknown, right out of the equation. All right, so if all these polar legends and experts are saying it wasn't O'Brady who was first, then who in the world was the true pioneer? Let me introduce you to Borge Ausland. This guy is considered by many to be the greatest polar explorer alive. And way back in 1997, long before Instagram feeds and live GPS tracking, he did what a lot of people thought was impossible. And when you put these two journeys side by side, the comparison is pretty startling. Ausland's trek wasn't just longer, it was literally twice as long. But the real difference maker for so many people is the route. Ausland blazed a brand new path across truly wild, untouched land. O'Brady followed a known road. And because Ausland's achievement happened before viral social media, it didn't get a lot of press. But for the people who knew, it was the real deal. But this whole argument, about records and definitions and routes, it kind of hides a much darker, more fundamental truth about Antarctica. And that's the unbelievable danger and the very real human cost of these attempts. So just 2 years before O'Brady's famous trek, a retired British Army officer named Henry Worsley set out to complete the first solo, unsupported, and unassisted crossing. He was inspired by his personal hero, the legendary Ernest Shackleton. He traveled for 71 days, and he covered over 900 miles. Let that sink in. That's farther than Colin O'Brady's entire journey. But the continent, it just started to take its toll. His body began to break down. He was only 126 miles from his goal. So close. But he was utterly exhausted and suffering from a serious infection. he had to make the call for a rescue. And tragically, he died in a hospital in Chile. His journey is just this harrowing reminder of how thin that line between ambition and survival really is.
You know, this modern obsession with being alone as some kind of record to be broken, that's actually a pretty new idea. To really get the history of solitude in Antarctica, you gotta go back to a time when being alone wasn't a choice. It was an absolute catastrophe you had to survive.
Just take the story of the Australian geologist Douglas Mawson. Back in 1913, his whole expedition was about science. He ended up alone after one of his companions fell into a deep crevasse, taking their best dogs and most of their food with him. Then his other companion died from sickness. Mawson's 100-mile solo trek back to his base. It is one of the most terrifying and incredible survival stories in human history. Okay, so after looking at all this, who really was the first to walk across Antarctica alone? And maybe the more important question is, what does that question even mean anymore? The truth is, there's no easy answer. Each of these guys represents a totally different face of solitude on the ice. You've got Mawson, the original survivor from that heroic age. You have Borja Ausland, the quiet pioneer, whose unbelievable accomplishment was mostly known only to his peers. You've got Henry Worsley, the tragic hero, the man who pushed himself to the absolute limit and paid the ultimate price. And then you have Colin O'Brady, the modern record holder who mastered not just the physical journey, but also the media landscape that really defines our time. What this whole controversy really shows is a massive shift in what we call exploration. What used to be about surviving the unknown for science and discovery has, well, it's evolved into something more like an extreme sport. It's got its own finely tuned rules, strategic media plans, and a ton of public drama, where figuring out who was first can be just as hard as navigating the ice itself. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. In a world with satellite phones, GPS that tells you exactly where you are, and rescue just a button press away, the whole nature of risk and discovery has changed forever. Has true, old-school exploration just vanished? Or has it just shifted? Maybe, just maybe, the greatest frontier we have left to explore isn't some blank spot on a map, but the one that's inside ourselves.